Hare Krishna. This is our last class. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari.
Jaya Radha
Gopi Jana Balaba Girivaradari. Gopi Jana Balaba Girivaradari. Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Yamunatira Vanachari. Namo Om Vishnu Vinaya Krishna Vishnu Bhagavate Mati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharne Nivasesa Nivali Bhaskati. So let's get to our verses. Thank you for being with us today. And the verse that you were studying last week, we can say together, but please stay on mute. Ata Shri Krishna Namadina Bhaved Grayam Indriyai Sevan Mukehi Jiwado Swayameva Sparachyada. Therefore, material senses cannot appreciate Krishna's holy name, form, qualities, and pastimes. When a conditioned soul is awakened to Krishna consciousness and renders service by using his tongue to chant the Lord's holy name and taste the remnants of the Lord's food, the tongue is purified, and one gradually comes to understand who Krishna really is. And the last verse that you'll be memorizing this week, Anashaktasya Vishayan Yatarha Mupayunjitaha Nirbandha Krishna Sambande Yuktam Vairagyamuchate. When one is not attached to anything, but at the same time accepts everything in relation to Krishna, one is rightly situated above possessiveness. On the other hand, one who rejects everything without knowledge of its relationship to Krishna is not as complete in his renunciation. Okay, so please put your questions for 17 through 19 in the chat window. Okay, it looks like we got some good questions today. What's the difference between Bhava Bhakti and Prema Bhakti? Very good question. The difference between Bhava Bhakti and Prema Bhakti is compared to a flower and a fruit. So Bhava Bhakti is the beginning of Prema, beginning stages of Prema. It's not full Prema. Does a chanting of Hare Krishna mantra lead to both of them? Yes. If so, why to follow the systematic process? Can you explain?
Yes, Mother. So my understanding is when I was reading through the Bhava Bhakti or Prema Bhakti, it was like, going through some of the things like, following a process and all. So my question is like, in some cases it was like the Lord was giving his special mercy and all, but in general way, we follow is a particular process, right? So
Correct.
instead of all this and all, can't we just chant Hare Krishna attentively and attain both of them? Forget about all the processes and all involved in it.
Yes. Yes. As we studied earlier, that any one of the 64 angas of bhakti can bring one to bhava and prema. Why just chanting attentively? Any one of the 64 angas of bhakti. It's possible. You can just by taking the Charanamrita, you can attain prema bhakti. Just by following the Rath Yatra card. So anyone. However, it's going to be difficult to chant attentively if you don't have a guru. How will you even know about chanting? I mean, right? How did you find out about chanting? You'd have to find out about chanting, you'd have to have some connection somehow with a guru. You'd have to have some connection somehow with the Shastra, even if you didn't recognize it as that. Does that make sense? I mean, it'd be pretty difficult. Possible. It's possible. It's possible simply by surrender. Just like in the Bhagavatam, Pingala. She was a prostitute. She just surrendered. And that was it. So that's possible. But why not be involved as much as you can? First of all, it's blissful. I mean, don't you want to also eat prasadam? You want to skip that part?
And the whole point I was seeing, Mother, throughout the Bhakti Shastri course or reading Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam is like the essence of everything is to have devotional service, whether we do the chanting, whether we have Shravanam or Kirtanam or whatever are the 9 processes.
That's right.
Of Bhakti. Yeah.
That's right. Yes, the main thing is to do service with devotion. But again, doing that without a guru is going to be very difficult. Almost impossible. I mean, figure it won't happen. It's possible. There are cases where it happens, but if we're going to say, well, I'm going to do this without a guru, then we should question, why do I want to do this without a guru? What's my motive? Does that make sense?
Yes, Mother. Perfect.
Yeah. Then there's probably something not so devotional going on there that I don't have a guru. But any one of the 64 angas of bhakti is potent enough, and especially the 5 most potent processes. But we say without a guru, it's impossible, because practically speaking, it's impossible. Like Prabhupada talks about, we'll talk about it today, you can get an honorary degree, but yeah, we'll talk about that. We'll get to that today. Sometimes Bhava can be achieved by special mercy of the Lord or his pure devotee. Are there examples of this? Yes, and we'll be discussing those today. About symptoms of Bhava Bhakti, Virakti, complete detachment. I was hoping somebody would ask this. Thank you, Pavani. In the case of Bharat Maharaj, how did his devotion get distracted or sidetracked by a deer? Is it then possible to fall down from the stage of Bhava Bhakti from being an Uttama Adhikari? Yes, it is. Bhava Bhakti is not mature. It is possible. Another person who fell from Bhava Bhakti is Bilva Mangala Thakur. So he had attained the stage of Bhava, but not Prema. Then he took birth again in a very high-class Brahmana family, but then he got involved, as Prabhupada said, you say girlfriend, we say prostitute. He got very involved with his girlfriend, Chintamani. And fortunately, his guru from his previous life, Somagiri, spoke through Chintamani and brought him back to the right path. But yeah, I mean, he was so attached to his girlfriend that during his father's funeral, he just left in the middle. He said, I have to go. It was a raging storm. He left his father's funeral and went there in a raging storm. She figured he wasn't coming that night. There was no texting in those days to say I'm not coming. He just saw the storm and she figured he wasn't coming. So she had locked everything, gone to bed. And the boatman had gone home because there was a raging storm. So Bilva Mangala, he needed to cross the river and he held onto a corpse to cross the river. And then he scaled the wall holding onto a snake. And then she said, hey, if you're so attached, if you were as attached to the Lord as you are to me, you'd be perfect. And he's like, oops. What examples are there of reflective and shadow ecstasy? I'm wondering if there are any specific examples given in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. I'd have to look that up if you're looking at specific persons. But I've seen it practically. I mean, for example, if we take out the Harinam party on, some New York or London streets on a Saturday night, and people are drinking and carousing, and some of them end up exhibiting symptoms of ecstasy just by the association of the devotees. That's generally shadow ecstasy.
But are they real emotions, or are they just like watching a movie and you have a reaction to
No,
a
they're
horror?
real.
Are they
Reflective, and that's a good question, and we'll discuss that more in the class, but reflective and shadow ecstasies are both real.
Oh, okay.
But they're not yours.
Right.
They're yours, but they're not yours.
In which sense are not yours?
Because they're being reflected or shadowed from a devotee.
Yeah.
I mean, but they are yours. They're awakening yours a little bit. So they're real. But they tend to fade. Like as soon as you're away from that devotee, there's no more reflection, there's no more shadow.
And I suppose only with an association with a devotee who's going through those emotions or feeling those emotions, you pick that up. And then when they are gone, the feeling goes as well.
Yes, exactly. So somebody may attend a festival or something and they may get a reflection or a shadow.
Oh, I see.
And then when they go, it's gone. Because it wasn't really there. They felt it. The soul was feeling it. So it was real in that sense, but it wasn't really theirs.
Right. Okay, thank you.
I mean, I'm trying to think if there's some material example. Yeah, like let's say you're around somebody who's really enthusiastic about some business plan or something, or some upcoming trip or something. They're really enthusiastic about something. And when you're with them, you pick up on their enthusiasm and you feel enthusiastic. And then after you're not with them, it very quickly fades. And you're like, I don't want to do that. And then, it's not, that wasn't me, that was them. I had a really negative experience like this with a college professor. So one of my college professors in graduate school hated men. She had a reputation all over the university. And the backstory was that when she was a young married woman with 2 young children, her husband had left her. And in those days, in the 70s, being a single mother was really a stigma. And he had just completely left her. And she had to put herself through school and work and take care of the children. And she ended up just hating men. And she was she had a lot of anger in general. She wasn't a very pleasant person, a brilliant scholar and a very good teacher, but not a pleasant person. Anyway, what they said was it was a lot easier for the women to get good grades in her class than the men. And I remember one of the papers I wrote, I quoted the Bhagavad Gita verse that among women, I am fame, fortune, memory, good speech. And so she was so happy with that. She said, wow, I didn't know this was in your scriptures. And anyway, one time during that semester, I was invited to go to Mayapur Dham for 5 days to do some mediation. And this meant that I was going to miss one of her classes. So it was the only time I talked to her personally. I talked to her after the class and I said, do I have your permission to miss this class? And I'll get the notes from the other students and so forth. And I was standing close to her, standing relatively close to her, just she and I were talking. And then as I was walking back to my car, I started thinking about all the times in my life where I'd had some negative dealings with men. And I was feeling very angry. for like the 10 minutes while I was walking back to my goal. This man did this and that man did this. And after like 10 minutes, all of a sudden I'm like, why? I don't usually think like this. This is not me. It's just not me. This is not the way I think. This is not the way I feel. And I was like, oh, I was picking up on her emotions. I was picking up on her subtle body. By being next to her, I had picked up on what was going on in her subtle body. It was really like, whoa, you got to be careful about it. Was quite interesting, because at first it was just there. And then it was like, what's that? That's not me. Where did that come from? So shadow and reflective ecstasy is a transcendental version of that, where you're picking up on the transcendent, genuine emotions of a devotee. And
Hare Krishna Mataji, I just wanted to ask in that point, like, how can you differentiate that this is what is our real emotions or the shadow one? Like, it's
well, the
it's very
shadow reflective one goes away as soon as you're out of that situation.
Okay.
Now, it is said, and we'll discuss this again briefly in the class because we're talking about it now. If you take that reflective or shadow, particularly the shadow one, and you nourish it, it can turn into the real one for you.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Think of it as a loan, like I loan you a book and you start reading it, but you're reading it, but it's my book. When you give it back to me, you can't read it anymore. However, borrowing my book might induce you to buy your own book. You might say, oh, I'm enjoying reading this book so much, I think I'll buy my own copy. So shadow and reflective ecstasy can lead to real bhava. And what's interesting is it can lead directly to bhava. Bhanu Swami talks about this, how, shadow bhava and reflective bhava can go right to bhava and skip all the other stages. That's possible. Doesn't usually happen, but it's possible.
That's why when we come in contact with the pure devotees, we can get the reflection of their, and then if we proceed with that, it happens
Yes.
to
Well,
me also.
reflection is usually something experienced. But anyway, we'll talk about it. We'll get to that. I don't want to get up. We'll talk about that in the class too. I'll make sure that I spend time on it. If bhakti itself is rarely given by Krishna, are the stages of prema and bhava bhakti ultimately dependent on Krishna's will? Yes, everything in bhakti is ultimately dependent on Krishna's will, but have no fear, Krishna wants us to have prema. So Krishna wants every fallen conditioned soul to have prema. He wants that. So, you don't have to worry about it. You have to be, oh my goodness, well, Krishna, he wants that. Just like any of us.
It's because he came as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and he wants everybody. It's because of that, or generally Krishna himself wants everybody?
Generally. As Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he's particularly compassionate. And he may give opportunities to people who wouldn't get that otherwise, because he's in a particularly merciful mood. But in general, just like any of us who are parents, we want a loving relationship with each of our children. Of course we do.
Okay.
What parent does not want that? I mean, maybe if they're really like crazy or abusive or something, but a normal parent wants a loving relationship with each of their children. Now, if the child's a junkie, a heroin addict, I know a family where the son was a heroin addict and they couldn't let him into the house because he would steal. But that doesn't mean they didn't want a loving relationship with him. So Krishna wants that. And if we demonstrate that we want it, then he'll certainly help us. It's not, we don't have to worry that, maybe I won't get mercy. That's one of the symptoms of bhakti, is that confidence that I know that I'm going to get the mercy from Krishna.
Thanks.
Okay, good question from Supriya. Is bhava under sadhana? No, bhava is not sadhana. When Prabhupada talks about being regulated, he means you can come to Bhava through regulated devotion. But Bhava is not right. Good question. What does it mean actually by special mercy of the Lord? How can one attract Krishna's special mercies if by constant devotional service? Well, if you're getting Krishna's mercy by constant devotional service, then it said that one has come to Bhava and Prema by following the rules, although mercy is always involved. But there are some cases where Krishna just gives mercy to somebody when they do very little. And why? I don't know. You have to ask him about that. And I suppose, again, we have material parallels that sometimes we may particularly be kind to somebody for no apparent reason. Right? I mean, it just happens. Sometimes generally we're very kind to people who have a long-standing relationship with us. But sometimes not. I'm just thinking actually of an instance. This was years ago, many years ago, 20, I don't know. Our family was going on a trip, probably to the New York Rath Yatra, but I cannot remember. And we had a lot to do. We had something special to do before we left. Again, I can't remember. My daughter and my sons would probably remember. I don't remember. But we had something special to do before we left. And it was besides just packing, and we were really overwhelmed with what we had to do. We didn't know how we were going to get it done. So we went to the Sunday feast, and there we met a family from Central or South America who we had never met before in our lives. Devotee family. They were initiated devotees, but we didn't know them at all. Husband, wife, and I think 2 or 3 kids. And they said that they needed a place to stay. So without knowing them and without anybody telling us anything about them, we said, you can stay at our place if you help us with this thing. We had something that needed to be done. Something for the Gurukul, I don't remember. And so they did. They stayed at our house and they helped us. And it was really Krishna's mercy, because had they not stayed, we would not have gotten all these things done. But there were several times that we were thinking, my husband and I were saying, we can't believe that we let basically complete strangers stay in our house. But, sometimes it's like that. Sometimes you may, normally you're going to reciprocate with people who have a relationship with you, but sometimes not. Sometimes, whatever. So Krishna's like that too. And I don't know. He's independent. What can attract his mercy? A sincere desire in the heart is what attracts his mercy.
Yeah, I just wanted to know that is it in the previous life someone would have done the regulative principles, everything, maybe in this lifetime, that is attracting Krishna's mercy, and then they are cultivated already the bhava.
Yes, that example is also given.
Okay, because the gopis were already in ecstasy, and then in their previous life they were like in Dandakaranya, Lord Rama was meeting the sages when they were doing the devotional service. So I was just thinking,
sometimes it may be something else. I mean, one of the most fascinating accounts that I've read, and it's a Christian, but it's a book called My Descent into Death. I can't remember the name of the author. And he was an intense atheist. I mean, he was like a militant atheist. He was an art teacher in a university. And he told all of his art students, I will not accept any religious pictures. You may not paint in my class, no religious pictures. So one year he had a nun as a student. And when she heard this, she went back, she was staying at the convent at night, but she was attending these art classes at the university. And she asked all the other sisters in the convent to please pray for the soul of this atheistic art teacher. And he was intensely atheistic. So fast forward many years, and I think it was 13 years. He was at some sort of convention in France. He got very sick and was put in a French hospital. And somehow he was ignored by the doctors and nurses, and he died. And he had what they call a near-death experience, where he remembered, he left his body, and he didn't realize that he was dead. Obviously, he came back to his body or we wouldn't have the story. So he saw what he thought were doctors and nurses asking him to come down a hallway. And he followed them. And as he followed them and followed them and followed them, he realized they weren't doctors and nurses, that he was dead, that they were demons. And they were torturing him physically, psychologically, and sexually in his subtle body, absolutely torturing him. And they were taunting him verbally, emotionally. And it just got more and more and more and more and more intense. And then he heard a voice that said, pray. That was the mercy. He heard a voice that said, pray. And he thought, pray? I don't even believe in God. And anyway, I don't know any prayers. And he thought, well, let me try it. So he didn't know any prayers. So he thought about songs he'd learned that had God in them, like God Bless America, things like that. So he started singing patriotic songs that had the word God in them. And as he did this in his subtle body, the demons backed off. They backed off, but they said, don't do that. There's no God. Don't sing, don't sing. There's nobody like that. But he felt encouraged that they backed off. So then he kept trying to think of more songs from his childhood that had the word God in it. And he kept singing this over and over, and the demons just disappeared. Then some higher celestial being came to him and showed him his whole life review and so forth and so on. And he was returned to his body. He had a very long recovery period. He eventually became a Christian minister, and he was preaching extensively. I'm not sure if he's still alive. He would say that when he would go into church, he would see, like, how Prabhupada said in the kirtans, he would see Narada Muni and Lord Brahma attending. So this man said when he'd go into churches, he would actually see the angels singing along with the people in the church. And several times he experienced such ecstasy that, like, he would faint in the middle of the church seeing these angels. Anyway, at one of his talks, this nun, who was his former student, heard that he was giving this talk, and she was amazed, and she came to the talk. And afterwards, she told him, she said, we were all praying for you every day, all of those years. You were included in our prayers. So that's an example of extraordinary mercy, where by the grace of devotees. So by the grace of devotees, and why did they do that? The nun could have said, oh, what a rascal demon atheist. I'll just go to the art class and do what I'm going to do. And oh, well, and somehow she had mercy. And so for 13 years, actually more than that, because she didn't see him, I think, for a couple of years after the near-death experience. So for like probably 15 years, every day when the nuns said their prayers, they included him, whatever his name was. And from that, even though he was going to hell and being dragged away by the Yamadutas to hell, he heard this voice that said, pray. So there you go. As another story I read, I don't remember the names at all, of this man who was a criminal and a really hardened criminal. Again, he hated God, he hated goodness, but his father was a very religious man. His father prayed for him every day. And he was so hardened that in prison he was put into solitary confinement. He was in solitary confinement for years, and his father had already died. And then in solitary confinement, again, he heard a voice that said, if you were to use this energy for good that you're using for evil, how wonderful that would be. And he turned his whole life around and also became very religious. And he attributed that to the fact that his father had prayed for him every day for so many years. So generally, the mercy of Krishna follows the mercy of a devotee. And why does a devotee choose to, who knows? Why did Narada choose to give mercy to Magarya? If someone becomes attached to the principles of salvation or emerging into the existence of the Brahma Jyoti, is externally gradually diminishes into shadow and power attachment. How someone practicing devotional service can develop such an attachment? Because bhakti is an automatic process, because we have free will. We have free will. And it's expected that in the beginning stages of bhakti, we have some attachment to bhakti and mukti. That's expected. And so if we cultivate those attachments through bad association or whatever, then our ecstasy may diminish. And we see this happening in our society. We see in our devotee society that people lose their taste. They go on externally, and one of the symptoms I see of this is that they become very angry and very critical. And the purport, Srila Prabhupada describes the symptoms of ecstatic love and continuation of the ecstasy is called samadhi. Does this mean once in samadhi, one can't do anything else? This is a devotional samadhi. I really like this question, Srinath. This is a devotional samadhi, and the comparison that I always give that we can understand is, let's say when you're in love, like if a man is in love with a woman is in love. In the beginning stages of love, you can't think of anybody else or anything else except the person you love. Or when you have a newborn baby, you can't think of anything except the newborn baby. Or even like if you're going to go on an exciting trip tomorrow and you're just thinking about that, but you're doing other things, you're functioning. You're going about your life, but you're constantly absorbed in that. It can be a fearful thing too. If I've got an upcoming meeting with my boss and I'm afraid I might get fired, so I may be constantly absorbed in that, even though I'm going about my activities. Even if we are not at the stage of pure love of God, and we still feel love and attachment to Krishna, is this not real love? It is. It's just immature. Imagine if it was gazillion times greater. And take whatever real love and attachment we feel for Krishna and multiply it by gazillion, billion, unlimited times. That's prema. In the section utilization of time, Srila Prabhupada explains, during these ecstatic activities, he sometimes shed tears, whereas we are cautioned not to exhibit ecstatic symptoms publicly, as it may be misleading to others. How important is this statement? In Bhava, the symptoms sometimes will manifest externally. The devotee mostly learns to control them, but sometimes they well up so much that they can't be controlled. When Prabhupada would get to that point, he would usually stop the class or stop the kirtan. But it will happen sometimes. I was at a Rath Yatra where I saw one sannyasi become stunned for 10 minutes. He became like a piece of wood for 10 minutes. So sometimes it can't be controlled. That was quite interesting. Asabanda, looks like nobody is qualified to be Krishna conscious, as even the greatest acharyas are considering themselves unqualified. At the same time, we are inspired to have hope and suggested nobody is disqualified. How can we have hope against hope? Oh, yes. What a nice question. So our hope is that even though I'm unqualified, that Krishna is going to be kind. Again, we are offenders. If we are in this world, we are offenders. We have offended Krishna. We are offending Krishna. We're not seeing him. We're not acknowledging him. We're trying to compete with him. And our only hope is that he's going to be kind. And I give this analogy all the time. But, let's say a man has affairs with 50 women. I mean, why should his wife take him back? I mean, we all know cases where in a marriage, someone has an affair and their spouse forgives them and takes them back, whether it was a man or a woman. Yes, I'm sure we all know. But they're not obliged to. It's mercy. If the person who has an affair says, well, I'm sorry, now you have to take me back, the other person's going to say, I don't think so. It's mercy. So we should have this mood of always feeling unqualified, that no matter how much we do in bhakti, that Krishna has no obligation to take us back. We really offend him. It's actually pretty severe. But we know that he loves us, and so we know he's going to take us back. Like a normal parent, again, there are abusive parents, but a normal parent will always want to take their rebellious child back, even if the child has done something so heinous that, I mean, I read it once about this police chief whose son was a convicted serial killer, but he still loved the boy. He wanted him to be in jail, but he still loved him. So Krishna, we have this hope that Krishna still loves me and he wants me back, even though there's no way I can ever deserve to be back. There's no way I can ever, there's nothing I can do that, you know, that I can say, now you have to let me back. This is a question answered by Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur, Prasant. Krishna's all the time busy with the gopis. How do we even attract his attention when the gopis are already? Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur raises the same question. He says, don't worry. Krishna said, I can still hear you and he's still attracted to you. Don't worry.
You know why I got that question? Recently, I got a painting of Krishna. Let me try to show it to you. This was a hand painting. I don't know if you guys can see this one.
Oh, beautiful.
So when I was looking at this painting, that was where I was getting this question, like, you know, the gopis are already at the stage of Prema and all. And I'm wondering with, you know, half broken concentration and all, I'm trying to chant and I'm not even closer and all. Is there any scope for me at all?
Well, that's very nice that you think that way, but Krishna still loves you. Again, like I have, my oldest son and his wife have 10 children. So they love all their children. So they're all, thank you, Krishna, they're all good children. But let's say one of them goes bad. It doesn't mean that they're going to think, well, I have my other 9 good children. What do I care about the one who's gone bad? Let them stay. Not like that.
Isn't it like the father or the mother always loves the child who follows the principles, what they have spoken, than the child who doesn't really follow them?
No, no, good parents love all the children, even the children who are rebellious. In fact, sometimes they think more about the children who are rebellious. You know, as a teacher, I found the majority of my attention went to the children on either end. The children who were very rebellious, very difficult, really struggling, and the children who were very together and did all their homework. And, you know, I found my attention went to the 2 extremes often. Now, that doesn't mean we should be a bad person to attract Krishna's attention.
I was just about to think in the same way.
No. Don't think, well, let me go kill a Brahmin and then Krishna. No.
Oh, no.
Don't go there. In praying to Radharani is the solution, then should we follow the acharyas who pray to Srimati Radharani to capture the attention? Well, whenever you're chanting Hare Krishna, there's many ways of understanding the Hare Krishna mantra, but one way is to understand that you're approaching both Radha and Krishna. That's not the only way to understand the Hare Krishna mantra. It is definitely one way. All right, those were such good questions. I'm going to miss these class times. All right. So, Bhakti Ras Amrita Sindhu, the Devotion Mellow Nectar Ocean, chapter 17 to 19. Now, of course, there's a lot more in the Nectar Devotion. The Bhakti Shastri class only covers the Eastern Ocean. It doesn't cover the Western, Southern, and Northern oceans. Chapter 17. So here we're in.
I just want to ask, is there any particular reason why in Bhakti Shastri it covers only up to 19 chapters or something?
You'd really have to ask what we call the BOEX, the Board of Shastric Examiners in ISKCON, why they made that decision. I believe it's because the other 3 sections of Nectar Devotion are much more advanced. The other 3 sections of Nectar Devotion are really equivalent philosophically to Chaitanya Charitamrita. In fact, almost all of the Nectar Devotion is in Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila in, interestingly enough, Lord Chaitanya's instructions to Sanatana Goswami, although this book is written by Rupa Goswami. So you'll find practically the entire Nectar Devotion is in the Madhya Lila of the Chaitanya Charitamrita chapter, I think starts with chapter 20. And the Chaitanya Charitamrita in the Shastric exams are in Bhakti Sarvabhauma. So I don't know if the rest of the Nectar Devotion is ever included in the Shastric exams. It's something I'd have to ask to Krishna Prabhu. I don't know. But that's my guess as to why it's done like that. If you want to study the rest on your own, Bhanu Swami has an excellent translation of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which I would suggest you would use alongside Nectar Devotion. Also, I understand if people don't want to read Dhanadhar Swami's book, but his book, Waves of Devotion, explains Nectar Devotion in terms of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and it's very well done. Again, if you didn't want to read his book, I would completely understand that. But then you've got Bhanu Swami's translation of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu with Jiva Goswami's commentary and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary. Well worth studying. Okay, so summary of chapter 17. This and chapter 18 are the third wave of the first ocean. So as you'll be going over in your next class, your review class, again, there's 4 waves in this Eastern Ocean. And this third wave is devotional service in ecstasy, or bhava, the preliminary stage of love of God. This is no longer sadhana bhakti. This is no longer devotion in practice. And at this stage, one is an uttama adhikari. So specifically, chapter 17 gives a definition of bhava and how one attains bhava. So the definition of bhava, and as you notice here that we're quoting, this verse is in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 131, and it's also in Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila 23.5. As I said, there's a parallel between Lord Chaitanya's instructions to Sanatana Goswami and the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So here we have this definition. Could someone read the translation, please?
When devotional service is situated on the transcendental platform of pure goodness, it is like a ray of sunlight of love for Krishna. At such time, devotional service causes the heart to be softened by various tastes, and it is called bhava, emotion.
So the primary characteristic of bhava is Shuddha Sattva Vishetatma, where Shuddha Sattva enters the devotee's heart. Now, this is not Sattva Gun. Remember, Sattva Gun is the I'm centered, I'm kind, I'm balanced. Sattva Gun has a false ego component to it. Shuddha Sattva is pure goodness without any pride. And this is the Samvit, Sandini, and Ladini potency of the Lord that enter the heart of the devotee. And its function is to revive the devotee's love for Krishna. It wakes up this pure love. And here we have the example of Bharat Maharaj, who attained the level of bhava. So this is considered uttama adhikaris. Note, there's other ways to define uttama adhikari that do not correspond to bhava. When we talked about who's most qualified to take up Vaidhi Bhakti, we talked about that a person who has great knowledge and faith in the scriptures has the uttama adhikari to take up Vaidhi Bhakti. That's a different uttama adhikari. The words uttama adhikari just mean the greatest qualification. So there can be different kinds of greatest qualifications. So the secondary characteristic is softening of the heart and giving rise to various tastes. What do we mean by various tastes? So this is from Jiva Goswami's commentary on that verse we just quoted, 131, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. A desire to achieve Krishna, a desire to please Krishna with various service, a desire to be close at heart with Krishna. Now, again, we're going to feel that even in the beginning of bhakti, but at this point, it is very intense. And elevation to bhava is, so that's what bhava is. So that was a definition of bhava. Now the rest of chapter 17 is how do you get there? So constant association with devotees. This is what Prabhupada means by regulated devotional service. So the basic process of devotion and the special mercy of Krishna or a pure devotee. So the usual method is the association with devotees. The mercy one is rare. So we should do service in the association of devotees. And the examples given of Narayana Muni, who by association with devotees achieved bhava. So this is, of course, from the first canto, chapter 7, I believe. can't remember chapter 6 or chapter 7. I was born as an insignificant son of a maidservant. Once during the 4 months of the rainy season, some exalted Vaishnavas came to the Brahmana school where my mother was living. I also got the opportunity to render personal service unto them. Although impartial by nature, they blessed me with their causeless mercy, because even though I was only a boy, I was self-controlled, I did not speak more than required, I was not naughty nor interested in childish play. Once with their permission, I took the remnants of their food, and as a result, all of my sins were eradicated. Because of this, and due to serving such great souls, the life of devotional service to the Lord became very attractive to me. In their association, I heard narrations of Lord Krishna's transcendently attractive pastimes. By such regular and attentive hearing, my taste for such topics increased at every step. When this transcendental taste became very strong, my attention became fully fixed on hearing about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As a result, the modes of passion and ignorance vanished from my heart, and I realized myself to be different from the gross and subtle bodies. I love those pure devotees greatly, and with very gentle behavior, I strictly followed their instructions. When they were about to depart, they instructed me in bhakti yoga. Then one day,
Mother,
yes.
sorry, Mother Urmila. How do we differentiate the mercy that Narada Muni got and the one that he gave to say Murugari the hunter? They both been given the mercy to get bhakti. Why is this
Well,
one
there's always
particular?
mercy involved, but Murugari followed a process afterwards. Like, we see Narada got this mercy because he was already serving them.
Mhm.
He was in this mood of service to them. Murugari was not. Well, of course, Murugari did offer Narada some skins, but Narada had this mood of serving them.
So the mercy he's been elevated from one stage to another, whereas Murugari was like an introduction to bhakti.
Yes.
It's a different.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's a very good way to put it. One day, while going out to milk a cow, my mother was bitten by a serpent and died. I took this as the Lord's special mercy. And he only had his mother, no brothers and sisters, no father. Even though I had no experience of foreign lands, I immediately left home and started for the north. After passing numerous cities, towns, villages, farms, forests, mountains, and valleys, I entered a densely dark jungle with snakes, owls, and jackals. Since I'd become very thirsty and fatigued, I drank the water and bathed to refresh myself. Then I sat down under the shade of a great banyan tree and began to meditate upon the Supreme Soul within, as I had learned from my spiritual masters. As soon as I concentrated my mind upon the lotus feet of the Lord, it became transformed due to transcendental love. As tears fell from my eyes, Lord Sri Krishna appeared on the lotus of my heart, and then all of my senses became spiritually enlivened. Thus, when the Lord vanished from my sight, I suddenly got up with great agitation. Despite my efforts to capture him with my meditation, I could not do so. Upon seeing my sincere attempts in that lonely place, the Lord, while remaining invisible, spoke to me with gravity and pleasing words just to mitigate my sorrow. "Oh, Narada, I regret to inform you that you will not be able to see me again during this lifetime. Those who are not free from all material contamination can hardly approach me. By my mercy, neither your advancement in Krishna consciousness nor your remembrance will ever be impeded, even at the time of creation or annihilation." Then that supreme authority, personified by sound and unseen by the eyes, but most wonderful, stopped speaking. Thus I began chanting the holy name and fame of the Lord by repeated recitation, ignoring all the formalities of the material world. So doing, I traveled all over the earth, fully satisfied, humble, and unenvious. In due course of time, I met with death. Thereafter, I appeared as Lord Brahma's sons. Since then, I have been traveling, constantly singing the transcendental message of the Lord, vibrating this instrument called a veena, which is charged with transcendental sound and which was given to me by Lord Krishna. The Supreme Lord Krishna, whose glories and activities are pleasing to hear, at once appears on the seat of my heart, as if called for, as soon as I begin to chant his holy name. Well, this is an example of somebody achieving bhava by following the process of bhakti, which of course includes getting the mercy of the devotees. So Narada Muni went through the process, which we'll go through at the end of the 19th chapter again. Faith, association with devotees, getting initiated, following the process, getting rid of anarthas, getting a taste, getting attachment, and then getting bhava. So he went through this process. Now we're going to have examples of people who got bhava without going through this process.
Mother,
Yes.
Okay.
go ahead, Mataji. I'll ask
No, you
Mother
can
later.
ask, no problem.
Okay. Mother, while you are presenting those slides, two questions that were coming into my mind was, the first question was when Lord, out of his causeless mercy, second time he was speaking to him, there was a word I couldn't understand, even while reading the Bhagavatam as well. So it was saying that he was still having material contamination. The question is, where was he having material contamination at all? He left without
He was
having
at the
any.
platform of bhava, not prema.
Oh, so that's called material contamination?
Yes.
And okay. And the second question I had was, explicitly it was mentioned that, once he left the body, he became the son of Brahma. Aren't we all the sons of daughters of Brahma?
But not directly. I mean, Lord Brahma is my great.
Yeah.
But Narada Muni was directly manifested from the body of Lord Brahma.
Okay.
Okay, now we're going to look at, oh wait, someone else had a question, Supriya, Gopi?
Yeah, even though if we develop bhava, then we cannot go to Krishna, but we have to get rid of all this contamination. That's what I understood from
Yes, yes. Although,
the story.
don't worry, when Krishna comes to the material world and has his leelas, even devotees who are not fully pure may join those leelas and become fully pure in that situation.
Oh, okay.
Nice, huh?
You mean that after death, we will be born in somewhere where Krishna is doing his leela, pastimes?
That's right.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
And then we can finish our process there if we haven't finished it here.
Oh, okay.
All right, let's look at just mercy. So,
how is that? Because if there is still contamination, like whatever the stage might be, we take birth, we haven't finished the process. We take birth in a planet where the Lord is, but if I still have contamination, how can I meet him? If I still have contamination, doesn't matter here.
You just spent a whole lot of time studying about the story of the Brahmana's wives.
Yes.
There's your answer.
Thank you.
And the Brahmana's wives are interesting because their ultimate destination was gopis, but in that time they weren't gopis. And they got purified by hearing about Krishna from the flower sellers and other people of Vrindavan. And then they got to meet Krishna, and one of them immediately became a gopi, and the others had to wait for another time. But even some of the gopis were not completely purified, and so when Krishna did the Ras Leela, they didn't go. They had to be purified by the separation anxiety. Okay, examples of special mercy. A girl who danced all night. So she didn't follow the whole process of bhakti. She just danced all night. And she got the mercy of the Lord and attained to bhava. So that's an example. Now, achieving bhava solely by mercy is not common. It's like if you want to get a degree without going to school. So when I was considering, I just had my undergraduate degree, my bachelor's degree, and I was considering getting a master's or maybe a PhD, and I asked different devotees, and most of them encouraged me, but my godbrother Dhruta Karma, he said, I never did that. I just wrote a book. Now, Dhruta Karma has gotten an honorary PhD. And I thought, okay, well, writing a book and going to school are going to take me about the same amount of time. It's going to take me some years to write a book. It's going to take me some years to go to school. And I thought, if I go to school, I know that if I do all the work, I'm going to graduate. If I write a book, I don't know if that will get me an honorary degree. I thought, let me go to school. I've also written books, but I thought, let me just go to school. So better to go through the standard process. Okay, so how is this mercy given? So the mercy can be given by the Lord or by the Lord's devotees. And how is it given? One is by speaking. So here's an example where Krishna said to Narada, "O best of the Brahmanas, I wish that you may develop unalloyed devotional service to me, which is full of transcendental bliss and all auspiciousness." So just by the Lord saying this, that's how he gave mercy. Someone had asked for examples. These are the examples. Mercy given by just looking. So Rupa Goswami gives this example from the Skanda Purana. When the inhabitants of Jangala province saw the personality of Godhead Krishna, they were so stricken with feeling that they could not withdraw their glance from him. So just by looking, they developed Bhava. By heartfelt wishes. So in the Shuka Samhita, Narada tells Srila Vyasadeva, "You have a son who is the greatest devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and I can observe that without any following of the regulative principles of devotional service, he is already enriched with many of the symptoms achieved by the execution of devotional service after many, many births." So this was by the heartfelt wishes of Narada. And this is also, Narada had heartfelt wishes for Kayadu's son, Prahlad. So this is another example of someone achieving Bhava by heartfelt wishes. Narada wanted Prahlad to achieve Bhava. Another example of heartfelt wishes is this hunter, Magrari. I mean, I am thinking it's interesting. You know, Magrari did do something positive. He said to Narada Muni, "I'll give you whatever you want. I have lots of animal skins to give you." With Jagai and Madhai, Jagai protected Lord Nityananda from Madhai. And then Jagai asked for mercy for Madhai. Lord Nityananda asked for mercy for Madhai. So in each case, these people did something. You know, the girl danced all night. Prahlad was listening to Narada's instructions. They did something, but they did not follow all the regulative principles of Bhakti. So it's not that they did nothing, but they would be considered just mercy. Okay, 18, summary. This is, so in 17, it was, what is Bhava and how do you get it? And in 18 is, when you get Bhava, what are the symptoms?
Hare Krishna. Yes. This important chapter examines the characteristics of a person who has developed ecstatic love. By studying them carefully, one will understand the difference between the ecstatic love of a genuine devotee and the so-called ecstatic symptoms of a pretender.
Very nice. All right. So chapter 17 was definition of Bhava and how you get it. Chapter 18 is what is Bhava? What does Bhava look like? How do you know? Now, Bhava is independent of the body. Bhava is independent of the mind. It may appear to arise from the mind, but it doesn't. So here are the symptoms. There's 9 symptoms.
So what it comes from Krishna.
Okay, let's go back to the definition of Bhava. What is the definition of Bhava? Where does it come from? Definition of Bhava is Shuddha Sattva Vishesatma. That's the primary definition of Bhava, is that the Shuddha Sattva enters the heart. The potencies of the Lord enter the heart. It does not come from the jiva. It comes from Krishna. It's not the jiva's mind or body. It's beyond the mind. All right, we've got 9 symptoms of Bhava. Important to know these. This is important to know. Why is it important to know? This is how can you tell whether or not it's real Bhava or not real Bhava. So we have here the Sanskrit and the English. Never wasting time, always doing service. That doesn't mean you run around like a crazy person. First of all, one should not imitate these. and they cannot be hidden. So Mahaprabhu explains in Chaitanya Charitamrita, you can tell who has bhava because they can't be imitated and they can't be hidden. So it's not that we artificially run around all day like a crazy person and burn ourselves out. Always doing devotional service, sometimes it may be sitting quietly chanting. To be tolerant and patient in great disturbances, indifferent to sense gratification, that's different from vairagya. And having humility, firm faith that Krishna will deliver one even though you feel very low, eagerness, constant attraction to Krishna's name, addiction to glorifying Krishna's qualities, and attachment for living in the Dham. Okay, we're going to look at each of them, utilizing one's time. Of course, we find Srila Prabhupada was always engaged in devotional service. Bhakti Vinod, it's also an excellent example how he used his time. You look at his schedule in Krishna's service. Perseverance. So the example given by Rupa Goswami is Maharaj Pariksit waiting for death on the bank of the Ganga. Detachment. Bharat Maharaj family. I want to note that this is called virakti, not vairagya. So vairagya is a discipline for an opulence. It's a discipline. But virakti is one doesn't have, is that one just doesn't have any interest at all. So it's not a discipline. Pridelessness. So Bhagirath, who called down the Ganga. So he was the emperor, but he went begging even to the homes of his political enemies and the untouchables and bowed down before them. This was his symptom of humility. Great hope. Can someone read this?
I have no. Okay.
Go ahead, Mother. I want to hear. Please go ahead.
I have no love for Krishna, nor for the causes of developing love of Krishna, namely hearing and chanting, and the processes of bhakti yoga by which one is always thinking of Krishna and fixing his lotus feet in the heart is also lacking in me. As far as philosophical knowledge or pious works are concerned, I don't see any opportunity for me to execute such activities. But above all, I am not even born of a nice family. Therefore, I must simply pray to you, Gopijana Vallabha, Krishna, maintainer and beloved of the gopis. I simply wish and hope that some way or other I may be able to approach your lotus feet. And this hope is giving me pain because I think myself quite incompetent to approach that transcendental goal of life.
All right, then eagerness. This was by Bhava Thakur. Can someone read this?
Bilvamangal Thakur in his book Krishna Karnamrita, he says, I'm eagerly waiting to see that boy of Vrindavana whose bodily beauty is captivating the whole universe, whose eyes are always bounded by black eyebrows and expanded like lotus petals, and who is always eagerly glancing over his devotees and therefore moving slightly here and there. His eyes are always moist, his lips are colored like copper, and through his lips there comes a sound vibration which drives one madder than a mad elephant. I want so much to see him at Vrindavana.
So these things are going side by side. This great hope of I have no love for Krishna and I want so much to see. These things are just side by side. This eagerness and this great hope that I'm so fallen and yet somehow Krishna will accept me. These cannot be imitated. Attachment to chanting the holy names that Radharani is crying, saying, Krishna, Krishna. And here we have another from Bilvamangala Thakur. Somebody could read this.
Krishna Karnamrita. What shall I do for Krishna, who is pleasing beyond all pleasurable conceptions, and who is naughtier than all restless boys. The idea of Krishna's beautiful activities is attracting my heart, and I do not know what I can do.
All right, attraction for living in the place of the Lord's pastimes. So here Rupa Goswami is quoting from Pajavali, talking about different places. Like, okay, here's this place where Krishna lived with his father Nanda. Here's this place where Krishna killed the cart demon. Here's this place where Mother Yasoda tied him up. So one is loving all the places that are related with Krishna's past. Okay, so after describing the 9 symptoms of bhava, then Rupa Goswami describes reflective and shadow ecstasy. So reflective ecstasy is when somebody approaches the difference between shadow and reflective, when someone approaches the Lord with material motives like wanting liberation. So it's not pure bhakti. They're coming to Krishna with some other motive. But by the association of devotees, the person may pick up on bhava. Then we have shadow. So shadow is if somebody, they're just like curious. They're visiting a temple, they're coming to the Rath Yatra. They're not coming because they want liberation or they want wealth. They're just curious. So remember the 4 kinds of neophytes: one who wants wealth, one who wants freedom from distress or liberation, one who's curious, and one who's already liberated and wants love. So reflective ecstasy can be in those who want wealth or liberation, and the shadow could just be some innocent person who's curious. And again, by the association of devotees or by the association of a holy place, they can experience this bhava, and they may feel relief from all distress. So both come from the ecstasy of a pure devotee. Now, what's interesting, a reflection is clearer. A reflection is much clearer, it's brighter. But a shadow is more connected. A reflection is usually separate from the person, and a shadow is usually connected with the person. So it's interesting, those wanting wealth and liberation, their desire is usually stronger. And so the reflection is brighter and clearer, but it's more removed. Whereas the shadow is not so bright, but it's connected. And shadow ecstasy is preferable. It's called transcendental because the person may feel relief from material distress. Now, if a person gets reflective or shadow ecstasy and they commit offenses, then that will go away. So it will not stay. It is also possible from a person to go from reflective or shadow ecstasy to real bhava, as we said before. That is also possible. I've seen that in one case. Now, there's also can be bhava in a beginner from a previous life. Now, I think Prabhupada's statement here is very important. Could somebody read this?
Real bhava, real bhava in a beginner, if it's seen that a person has developed a high standard of devotion without having undergone even the regulative principles, it is to be understood that this status of devotional service was achieved in a former life. For some reason or another, it had been temporarily stopped, most probably by an offense committed at the lotus feet of a devotee.
So we have 2 warnings here about offenses. One is that even if we attain a very high level of bhakti, up to the level of bhava, if we commit an offense, we may have to a devotee, we may have to take birth again. And not with Krishna in his Leela, but we may have to take birth again on the earth planet. And if we get some shadow or reflection of ecstasy from a devotee and we commit offenses against devotees, then we will lose it. So now there's some talk about offenses against devotees. So if a person who's in bhava may still have some defect, like we were talking about, Krishna said to Narada Muni, you still have some defects. But these are like spots on the moon, and they should be ignored. There will be defects even in advanced devotees, just like there are spots on the moon. But if we offend the devotees, then we'll lose our little shadow or reflection of ecstasy, or we'll even have to take birth again if we have some real ecstasy. All right, our last chapter that we study, chapter 19 on Prema Bhakti. This is the fourth wave, although it's only one chapter. This is the fourth wave in this ocean, Prema Bhakti. And here the definition of Prema is given and the way to attain Prema is given. There's not much of a description of the symptoms of Prema because Lord Chaitanya said that the symptoms of Prema can be imitated and can be hidden. With Bhava, the symptoms cannot be hidden or imitated. With Prema, they can be imitated or hidden. So you can tell who's at Bhava, but you cannot tell who's at Prema. All right. Definition of Prema. Can somebody read this definition?
When lust is completely transferred to the Supreme Godhead and the concept of kinship is completely reposed in Him, such is accepted as pure love of God.
Okay. And here is the definition from, this is the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu verse quoted in Madhya Lila. If somebody could read this. Just the English.
When the bhava softens the heart completely, one becomes endowed with a great feeling of possessiveness in relation to the Lord and become very much condensed and intensified. It is called Prema, love of Godhead, by learned scholars. Chaitanya, Charitamrita Madhya Lila, 23rd chapter, verse 7.
Okay, here's another definition. Can somebody read this?
Great authorities like Bhishma have explained that love of Godhead means completely giving up all so-called love for any other person. According to Bhishma, love means reposing one's affection completely upon one person, withdrawing all affinities for any other person.
Now, when we love Krishna, we love everyone. But this statement of Bhishma reminds me of when we met with Prabhupada in 1976. And our oldest son was 1 year old. He was sitting on my lap quietly. And my father asked Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada gave me as an example. He said, just like this mother is loving her child without any expectation of return, in this way one should love Krishna. And my father asked Prabhupada, can loving her son help her to love Krishna? Prabhupada said, no, but loving Krishna can help her to love her son. So when we fall in love with Krishna, we naturally love everyone. And love of Godhead is when we only love Krishna, and therefore we love everyone. So Prema also has primary and secondary traits, just like Bhava did, and just like pure Bhakti definition did. So the primary definition of Prema is Bhava Sa Eva Sandranatma. It's the mature state of Bhava. So you take the understanding of Bhava and you mature it. And this can be defined as when one's desire to love Krishna in one's particular relationship becomes intensified. This is known as pure love of Godhead. So if I'm in the mood of Krishna's mother or Krishna's father or Krishna's cowherd boy or Krishna's servant or Krishna's beloved, so when that becomes intensified, that is called Prema. Secondary traits, the heart becomes completely softened. Remember, the secondary trait of Bhava is that it softened the heart. Secondary trait of Prema is the heart's completely softened. And this is an interesting one, Mamatva, possessive ownership of Krishna, my Krishna. Krishna is mine. Now, this means Krishna is my master. Krishna is my son. Krishna is my lover. Krishna is my friend to serve. Not Krishna is mine to exploit. So how do we get to Prema? So we get to Prema from Bhava, either the Bhava of Vaidhi Bhakti, attachment to Krishna's majesty, or the Bhava of Raganuga Bhakti, attachment to Krishna's sweetness. Okay, so from regulated sadhana, from Vaidhi sadhana, one can go to Vaidhi Bhava, and then Vaidhi influenced Prema, or Raganuga sadhana, Raganuga derived bhava, Raganuga influenced prema. We'll have an example of Raganuga sadhana was Chandrakanti, who observed celibacy her whole life and always thought of the Lord as her husband. So she had Raganuga sadhana, which matured into Raganuga bhava, and then Raganuga prema. So what about the role of mercy? You can get prema by mercy only. Just like one could get bhava by mercy only, one could get prema by mercy only. I think an example of this is the son of King Prataparudra. But in essence, all prema is achieved through mercy, because the purpose of sadhana is to attract mercy. So we can say there's Vaidhi sadhana, which attracts mercy, which brings prema in the mood of opulence, in the mood of Vaikuntha. And here we have the evidence given by Rupa Goswami. Can someone read this?
In the Narada Pancharatra, it is said that if on account of profound veneration for the greatness of the Supreme Lord, one attains a great affection and steady love for him, one is certainly assured of attaining the 4 kinds of Vaishnava liberation.
Thank you. Now in Raganuga sadhana, there can also be mercy and then one-pointed Kevala prema. And the examples given of the gopis. Can somebody please read this?
Srimad Bhagavatam 11.1.7. The gopis in Vrindavana did not study the Vedas to achieve me, nor had they ever been in holy places of pilgrimage, nor did they devotedly execute any regulative principle, nor did they undergo any kind of austerity. It is simply by my association that they have attained the highest perfection of devotional service.
Now, of course, we might say many of these gopis did all these things in their previous life. That could also be said. Okay, now here, the end of this chapter, Srila Prabhupada describes Shraddha to Prema. So first there's faith. Now, I find this statement of Prabhupada very important. Srila Prabhupada says there are many societies and associations of pure devotees. And if someone with just a little faith begins to associate with such societies, his advancement to pure devotional service is rapid. So here Prabhupada is discussing Shraddha and Sadhu Sangha. Now, sometimes members of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness think that we are the only society of pure devotees. And Prabhupada is very clear here. There are many societies and associations of pure devotees. And Prabhupada was starting one of them. He wasn't starting the only one. So this is faith and association. So Shraddha and Sadhu Sangha. Shraddha and Sadhu Sangha, association of pure devotees. Then Bhajana Kriya, following the principles of devotional service under the guidance of the pure devotee and accept him as a spiritual master. That's Bhajana Kriya. Then we come to Anartha Nivritti and Nishta. As a result of such activities, he becomes freed from all unwanted occupations. When he's freed from unwanted occupations, his faith becomes steadily fixed. Then from Nishta to Ruchi, Ashakti, Bhava, Prema. He develops a transcendental taste for devotional service, that's Ruchi. Then attachment, that's Ashakti. Then ecstasies, that's Bhava. And the last stage is pure love of God. So this is the way generally that Prema is achieved. Shraddha or faith, Sadhu Sangha, the association of devotees, Bhajana Kriya, one takes up the process of bhakti, Anartha Nivritti, the unwanted material things go away, Nishta, one becomes fixed, Ruchi, one gets a taste, Ashakti, one gets attachment. That's all within practice bhakti. Then one gets ecstasy and Bhava Bhakti, and one gets love and Prema Bhakti. So this is generally how Prema develops, although undoubtedly mercy is always involved. At every step, some mercy is always involved. All right, this concludes our study of the Nectar Devotion. that we will study in our Bhakti Shastri class. And I have a conference today, so I will not be teaching the review class. My daughter Champakalata is going to be teaching the review class for everybody. Yay! She's a great teacher, much better than I am. So I'm sure that you will really relish having that class with her. So we have about 9 more minutes. So we're gonna close in 9 minutes. We're gonna close the Zoom conference, and don't use this link. So after your break, you're going to use the link to get on her Zoom conference, and she's taking everybody together. The Govinda group and the Keshra group is all going to be together. She's going to take everybody, and you're all going to review. And then the next 2 weeks, next week you'll be doing the test on Nectar Devotion, and I think the next week we're having the classes available for you to work on your open book exams. For any of you who haven't finished that, and you can ask Champaka about that. She would know more about it than I would. She's the one running this. I am just simply her assistant. She's running the program. So
what are the open exams? All the questions.
The open book exams are an essay. You're writing an essay.
Yes.
Those essays. So you write either 1 or 2 essays on each book or the chapters. Yes. So, anyway, all those questions are for Champakalata. I'm just a teacher here. She's running the program. So anything else anybody would like to discuss for on these 3 chapters for the next few minutes?
Is Dhruva Maharaj also, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Mahalakshmi. Is Dhruva Maharaj also on the Bhava Bhakti platform?
Interesting. It would seem he must have been when he was fighting with the Yakshas. It seems he probably wasn't Prema at that time. Although my understanding is at the end he attained Prema. So before he gets on the Vaikuntha airplane, he attains Prema.
Maybe.
What about Prithu?
Oh, so I get this answer.
What, Mahalakshmi?
What? Because he attained Prema in this body, and Vaikuntha plane came to pick him up. He didn't go to another planet to finish the process. So one can finish the process in this planet? Sure,
why not? But again, he didn't enter into Vrindavan Lila, he entered into Vaikuntha Lila.
Okay.
It's also a little different.
Another thing is that you mentioned Vairagya and Virakti or something. So Vairagya is that one is practicing it. And the other one, what it is?
One has achieved it. It's just like this one friend of mine who was very overweight, like they call morbidly obese. You know, someone who was grossly overweight, like I think 500 pounds or something ridiculous, you know, some huge overweight. So he had a medical scare and he decided he was going to lose weight. So the main thing he's doing is not eating pizza. Evidently that was his problem, was eating too much pizza. So his thing is not eating pizza, and he's lost a lot of weight. 103 days without pizza, 104 days without pizza. So it's a discipline. My guess is that he still likes pizza. That's my guess. I'm guessing, but probably he hasn't lost a taste for pizza. He just doesn't want to die of a heart attack when he's 25. So he decided that giving up pizza was worth it. But it's a discipline. He's doing a discipline. And sometimes he'll write, you know, today I ate a little too much. So he has bad days where he slips a little bit, but he still hasn't eaten any pizza. He's done well with the not eating pizza. But it's a discipline. Now that's different from a person who naturally doesn't want to overeat. It's different. You know, so there's the virukti is one just has no interest. The way it's explained, Prabhupada explains that on the platform of Bhava, you see the naked form of material desires. The Maya is removed. In Vairagya, the Maya is still there. You have a discipline of detachment. Vairagya can also be one of the opulences where you enjoy your autonomy and freedom. But I always give this example from the Greek Odyssey. Prabhupada likes to refer to it also. So he refers to the English word sirens from, and they would eat sailors. They were cannibals. So they were these ugly witches, and there was a mountain of bones on their island from the dead sailors. It was a desert island. But they would sing, and their singing was a spell. So anyone who would hear their singing would look at the island and see a beautiful tropical island with young, beautiful women and coconuts and mangoes and things like that, and would be just drawn to this island. So Ulysses told his men to plug their ears with wax. They didn't have, commercially available earplugs in those days. Noise canceling ear headsets. So they put wax in their ears, but he wanted to hear the siren. Just like we have that Markandeya Rishi who said, Krishna, I want to see what your Maya is. So Ulysses was like, I want to experience this spell. So he didn't plug his ears, but he had the men tie him to the mast. You know what the mast is, the big pole that the sail goes on. He had his men tie him to the mast. And he said, while we are going past this island, do not obey any of my commands. So the men who had their ears plugged with wax, they looked at the island and they see these hideous witches on a desert with a pile of bones. And so they're rowing away as fast as they can. Sees this beautiful island, these beautiful women, and he's trying to get out of the ropes, and he's screaming at his men, go to the island, what's wrong with you, go to the island. So Vairagya is you've tied yourself to the mast with ropes, and Virukti is you have wax in your ears. Virukti is you look at Maya and you see what Maya actually is. Vairagya is you don't see Maya for what it is, but with higher knowledge and higher intelligence, you follow a discipline. But Virukti, you see it for what it is. And so there's no attraction. Prasant, you had a question?
I have a question.
Oh,
Yes, Mother.
Srinath, did you have a question?
Yes, Prabhu. I mean, you just mentioned, and this triggered a thought in me. We always hear like there is a Vrindavan Leela, and then there is Vaikuntha Leela, and then there is a statement like wherever there is a devotee, that place is Vaikuntha. Whatever pastime is happening, like there is no, I mean, such place where we can receive Lord is in our heart. So how we differentiate this? We see there are several incarnations, and there are so many planets, and even in the spiritual world, and each incarnation has their own parshad. I mean,
Yes.
eternal servants. So what I'm trying to understand here is what is the difference between the Vrindavan Leela from the devotee point of view? His ecstasy can be same, like serving Lord Nrsimhadev. For instance, Prahlad Maharaj, he derived this complete completion that a person serving in Vrindavan Leela is deriving. This is their service. Similarly, like devotees like you, Srila Prabhupada, they are like deriving the same. I mean, what philosophically how it is different?
You're asking the difference between the Dhams of the different avatars?
I'm from a devotee point of view. Like if I see myself, it doesn't matter if I enter Vrindavan Leela or Vaikuntha Leela or serving here for Srila Prabhupada. My role is to pay attention to my bhajan.
That is the ultimate meditation of the Prema Bhakta. They actually don't see any difference.
Mhm.
That's nicely described in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, when Gopal Kumar comes to the material world to preach. And he talks about going and coming. He says, I only see the difference going and coming. Otherwise, there's no difference. Is Vairagya, this is my last question, and then I have to end. Is Vairagya temporary? It can be. Yes, it can be. And we already talked about how Vairagya in and of itself is not an anga of bhakti, although there are angas of bhakti that involve Vairagya. I will take from Kardamani, you very rarely ask something, so we'll take this, but we are already over time.
Thank you, Mother. My question was that as you just mentioned, that like a pure devotee does not see any difference between Vaikuntha Leela, Vrindavan Leela, or being here in the material world and serving. But my question was, isn't a devotee like has a particular, like for example, a devotee of Krishna, they naturally want to be with Krishna?
Yes. But as far as whether they're serving in the material world or the spiritual world, they don't see any difference. As far as the particular taste, yes, they definitely see it. So like Hanuman wants to be in Ayodhya, he doesn't want to be in Dwarka. You've got Jambavan who likes to be in Dwarka and Ayodhya. Rohini who's in Vrindavan and Dwarka. Narada Muni who's everywhere. But most devotees, they have a particular taste. Okay, we're going to end now. Thank you very, very much. And then I will be closing down this. You'll not be rejoining this Zoom link. And you'll be, Champakalata will be teaching the review. That will be in 13 minutes. Thank you very much. I hope that this has been helpful and that you gotten something out of this by the grace of Shri.
Great fortune.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mother
Truly.
Urmila.
My great
Amazing.
fortune that I have an opportunity
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much.
to absorb myself in Shastra. Thank you.
Essays. It'd be easier if
True.
you could send
Thank you,
whatever
Mother.
class that I taught, whoever.
Thank you so much, Mother. I just felt like I just joined yesterday.
Hare Krishna. Okay, so any
Thank you, Mother Urmila.
technical questions about the course, you can also ask to Champaka. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna,
Thank
Mother.
you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.